crowd. Welcome to Helicon West. We would like to thank the Logan Library for this nice venue. Katrina Farrow is the one who's in charge now because Joseph Andersen got promoted out of our realm. He's now some big director sort of guy. He's an assistant director in the library. I'm sorry, what, Millie? Did I say the wrong name?
No, I just said he's too good for us.
Oh, no, but he is still in touch and he still loves us. And I want to announce that we have a new broadside out. It looks like this. So remember, the Helicon West broadsides are created, at the moment they're created by Tasha Urban, who's an art and design major at Utah State University. And tonight's Helicon West broadside has Ray Marie's poem on it. It doesn't have a title, right? Yeah, it starts with work hard. You should buy one of these. They're in the back. They're $2. And the artwork is by Grace Harrell. And we have a whole lot of Helicon West broadsides all over the stairwells at Ray B. West on campus. They're pretty inspiring. We don't have Cafe Ibis coffee here tonight. I apologize for that. In April, since it's Poetry Month, we all get double, triple, and quadruple booked. And so we've just been running from one thing to the next all month. And so I didn't have time to pick up coffee because Cafe Ibis closes too early these days. That's my only complaint I'll ever have about Cafe Ibis, is they close too early. All right, Isaac, when do you need to take off? Because I want to know if you want to read first or if you can read later.
I'm fine.
Are you good?
I have to leave till 8:20 or something. So.
Okay, fabulous. And we're going to go in order of the book. So tonight is Poetry at 3. And Natalie, there's room up here. You should come up here and sit down, right? Poetry at 3 is a local poetry group that's been going since, about 1993. And we've been doing an annual reading since 2000. And we've been reading at Helicon West ever since Helicon West started coming around, 12 years ago or something. And tonight you'll get to meet the current poets of Poetry at 3, and you'll get to listen to our varied, wonderful voices, because we all have this poetry group that we go to and we help each other, but none of us sound alike. And that's always refreshing in a poetry group. You don't want a poetry group whose work all sounds the same. And so this is the book. It's $5. You can get it in the back. And we also have some former volumes of Poetry at 3 back there. If you buy this one, it's $5. But if you want to buy some of the others, they're 2 for $5. Just for you, because you came to Helicon West. Anybody have any announcements that you need me to give before we plunge in? I'm doing a poetry walkabout in Ogden on Saturday. It's with Writers at Work, and they charge for their events. Usually all of my events are free and open to the public. This one is open to the public, but you have to drive to Ogden and you have to register for it. And if you'd like to see me after to see what that's about, I'll be happy to tell you more. So, nice book. I'll read first, and then, let me see, are they in order on the cover? Yeah. And then Russ Winn, then Mary Ellen Greenwood, then Shannon Ballam, then Brock Dethier, and Isaac Timm, and Felicia Rose. And I could introduce them all to you, but don't you think you ought to just say something about yourselves when you get up? Yeah, everybody's nodding. You can be a lot more interesting if you just say something about yourselves. What do you want to know about me? Anything?
Favorite kind of ice cream?
I can't have ice cream right now, so don't remind me.
What you get when you ask for questions from the audience?
Wasn't that a good answer, though? I think I'll just read 4. Because we've got a lot on the agenda tonight, and we've got a lot of open mic readers. That's exciting. So I'll read 4. And the first one is titled Dust. stuff of dog dander, dead skin, critters that live in cells too small to see. Dying, their shells float, tiny as pinpricks, stick to each other in motes. Shook from clothes thrown off in amorous moments, they gather with carpet mites, grit sifted deep into fibers, kicked up with the toss and thunk of a boot. Prehistoric dead rising, floating, spores, molds, pollens, universe of all the dust that ever was, bound with bits of planets, shattered meteorites, dancing on a swath of light, an indoor Milky Way. This poem's title is Someone Else's Now. There sits the 70s brick rambler with the rose peach gable ends and triple stacked chimney, the brick she picked out with her spouse, now her ex, the paint she insisted on mixing herself to get the color no one else in the valley had seen or achieved, so their house was set apart. It was set apart, lawn immaculate, trees placed for perfect shade, brought from her mother's place for free, considered for weeks before digging the hole. She dug the holes, hauled the new saplings, watered them to stately canopies. Then she left them, left that perfection of house and garden, the garden she built with elliptical walls, planted with yucca and iris, pansies and 4 o'clocks. There sits the side yard where she scraped the mounded earth from leftover clay and rock, heaped it up with topsoil, planted its borders in bright orange marigolds, and filled the inside with dark purple petunias, a contrast that startled her neighbors. They were the neighbors who scorned her after she left, believing the opposite of why, their only view on the outside. There it stands, run down, repainted, refaded, after years of other families, no longer that rosy hue, that envied facade, floors swept and reswept of the eggshells strewn in every room, in the house she built and made exact and left to someone else. Shrug. Cloud shoulders press hot rain through sun's bright sash, colors spreading prismatic, mounded landforms greening up against a backdrop of far away. This semi-arid ecosystem, too much to imagine, almost magic, this climate, this transition zone. Weather splits, muscling hard against the middle, El Nino fanning its troops, thrusting marchers en masse to the castle, onslaught of rain, then sleet, until at last the sunstream breaks and birds come out to bathe. Here in the city, skyscrapers mirror desert and tropics oppositely, sidewalks drowning in the aftermath. A gilded patterning like gold leaf slants off slanted rooftops, apology for all of us huddling here in sodden spring, wondering what it means, the shrug, the wink. Last poem, Volcano Dream. They live the last days, all their dishes rattling onto the floor in the quake, only an onion and 2 carrots, plastic wrap and slotted spoon, non-skid rug and kitchen sink. Wife lines up their children in a long row, oldest to go first into bright moon, youngest a shadow in the sun. She follows, legs like rubber, dizzy sensation pitting her gut, as if love-making were possible once more before the end. She leans into a clothes rack redolent with old spice, leaves her better self there on the bed, languishing, warm flannel sheets and a coating of hot, feathery ash.
That was only like 4 minutes of star. That is not enough. I'm Russ Winn. I teach at USU. I write a lot about my youth and about growing up in Idaho. I have a few poems to share about that, and then I have something I wrote yesterday that I'm going to read despite. This first poem is called Reap. It's about the things that you find in bales of hay. I see the pinned body of a blow snake, mangled in the cutting, tumbled in a heap by the swather, pinched with grass into windrows, draped across the landscape and ready for baling, lines on a runner rug, woven by spinning tines of an old star wheel rake. Later, the baler pressed serpent skin in with dried clover and alfalfa leaves, spit out a square bale, tied bundle, licorice twine, tight like a package, left out to dry among sweet smells of hay, coumarin, and a dusty late fall cutting. I tip the bale off the back of the truck, cut strings, pull skin and meat in pieces from the straw, and leave the bones for the survivors, voles huddled in groups under clay, hawks on poles leering in the light of evening. When I was young, I used to talk to trees a lot because I was an only child, so that's what this next poem's about. It's called Teenager at a Campground. I told a shabby larch I thought I loved a girl and watched for flickers of life, of reply. I had things to say to no one, anyone, and trees standing long and distant as a jury box. But spring in a state park is fecundity, eggs and damp, marrying air and insect wings and that steady whisper of the river feeding life. You don't need words to get breeding right, you just need the language. I stood in a clump of wrinkled t-shirt, Velcro shoes, weak-worn jeans, and I knew I didn't have language for most things. This next one is about climbing around in a haystack in the dark. It's called Labyrinth. I remember a time when I bathed in moonlight under stars cities never see, scaled columns of hay, stacked for winter, seeking bolt holes. Caked in hoary dust, I crawled through dusky tunnels made by shifted bales, trailing hay strands in moonlight like bits of spider silk in the dark. I edged along in folded bales, searched for breeze and beam of light, then gripped slick fur and a movement, felt the rush of escape. It was a cat. The cat fled for new space, and I, dazed in fear and coated in sweat, sat on my ass like the bull of Minos and laughed at the shock. Growing up an only child in Idaho was a unique experience, and I had to come to terms with reality in a lot of different ways. So this next poem is really about killing. It's called 8 Years Old. You and I walked past 2 trucks on hot gravel to the barn, through 16 head of cattle in the feed stalls, under damp bales of late summer hay in the loft, and I thought the old prairie barn looked deserted. Old barns seem abandoned on the farms here. Great upturned ships run aground along the highway all the way out to the river bottoms. In this sea of grass, we both swung BB guns for shooting bugs and rocks and dandelions, but never birds. You turned and shot a pellet at my shoe, then pointed a finger at me. God doesn't want us to use these to kill animals, you said. Bugs are okay. Why did he even give us guns then, I asked. Bugs are okay, you said, and flowers and pop cans. After you left, I crouched low among the milking stalls, settled on a sparrow, sitting on a beam and fired. It spiraled quick to the ground like a falling seed, and I watched as it lurched forward, back broken, still singing. When I could bear it no longer, I crushed it under my tennis shoe, dropped the gun, and went back into the August heat. The last poem that was written yesterday that is in progress is a response to a lot of things. I was thinking about the things that happened at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge a few years ago when the militia went and occupied it, and how there was a contingent of my old religion, the LDS religion there, who used that religion as a form of justification for some of the things that they were doing. And my view of that religion growing up held a component of that thought too. But to me, the best parts of the religion was never about that. It was about the people in that, and it still is. So this is kind of a response to that sort of attitude. It's called Revolt, and it begins with a quote from the Book of Mormon, Alma 59:13. And it came to pass that Moroni was angry with the government because of their indifference concerning the freedom of their country. O God, the eternal Father, I have sculled alone, pulled oars of old ideas and righteous ire through seas of scriptural fraud. I have learned it is not within me to declare government my enemy, O God, the eternal Father, to want for blood and maelstrom, to lay hands on tyrants. I ask thee instead to witness my want for wilderness, birdsong, taut canyon breeze, and to spill no blood save the poppies at my feet. I am tired, and my rest from you in rain and sunset is enough. Amen. Thank you.
Mary Ellen Greenwood holds the title as the world's okayest mom, a title she gave herself. She teaches composition and grammar classes at USU, which is her dream job, and she writes in her free time, which is her dream hobby. And she's starting a PhD program in the fall, which is just her dream, so. So excited. It only took 18 years, but here I am. This first poem, really excited. If you go to Red Butte Garden this month, this poem is going to be on display there for National Poetry Month. And you didn't have to pay them for it either. It's called Waiting. I once was a tulip. When the ground softened, I jump-sprouted, impatient, but winter stalled, weighed down, waiting bud with snow-heavy chill. I once was a crocus, nosing up through the mud, edging past stone, through crusted black ice, chase fleeting sun to weather the weather. I prefer lilacs, testing new leaves in poker-faced spades, crafting tight buds hard and round, waiting until warm days are tallied, trusted, then explode in chaos of blossom. My next poem. Oh, this one, I was really excited. It was published in the journal Not Very Quiet, because I'm not. It's called Flying. They say if man were made to fly, he'd have been born with wings. They forget the summer child astride a bike who pumps her legs to lift off crest of railroad incline, where silver tracks criss-cut road to soar down asphalt, wind-whipped hair snarling rough, open mouth to feel the tongue, the cheeks, the lips, shrivel, parched of slimy spit, taste unlucky gnats. The brave bird knows to lift her arms, remove her grip from handlebars, search for weightless speed, defy the gravity that chains her mother to the ground. I'm going in a weird order. Oh, okay. This one it reflects one of the earliest memories I have of violence and kind of a loss of innocence. It's called Wild. My father brings home 3 rabbits, black, white, brown. They bite at the wire. Blood seeps from their teeth, stains their fur. We fence a run in the yard with 2 cages. One for the female, pink-eyed and skittish. She gouges deep streaks in my arm. The rule is the doors cannot both be open, one at a time, because of more rabbits. I don't understand. The day when the rabbits are all in the yard, the doors are both open. Was it me or the wind? The doe has 5 babies, more rabbits, more rabbits. She pisses on lumps, squirming on a worn blanket. This one is for my mom. called The Good Nurse. Productive. Corporate suits and skirts explain the move from 8-hour shifts to 12. Efficient. Less clock out, clock in, report. More time on the floor, on the feet. Watch for call lights, empty bedpans, change IVs, catheter bags. Check for heart rate, white pills and paper cups. Trays of pale eggs, clear broth. 1, 2, 3, lift and transfer patients bed to bed. Change a bandage, socks, a weeping pad between a new mother's legs. Her varicose ropes now twist under spider vein skin, under beige compression socks. Bionic knees replace joints worn to cartilage. Hips complain, hands pulsate, stiffen to grasp a garden spade. Turn a page, use a mouse, stir a pot. This was, when I got divorced. You know, anything is inspiration for a poem if you think about it. It's called Delilah Emerges. Remember when he left, needed someone else to support his dreams, his leaps from job to job to job. But don't remember when he killed the cat on Christmas Eve. Hold that image for when you adopt more cats and a dog he cannot touch because he's gone. Thank God all the fur on the couch can stay. Remember when he phones, ends 9 years from 800 miles away, rage, rejection, color your eyes, find electric razor with 1-inch guard and haphazard cord stored in a drawer, lift it to hair grown out down to the bra, run dull blades over scalp, the buzz, dim-witted but true, wince when a strand catches and pulls, then falls to the floor, a cap of 5 o'clock shadow remains. The relief of the weight off head, mind, heart, the box-dyed tresses piled on the tile, black on white. Shave away what he loved, then look. See lines near eyes, droop of lids, speckles of scars, sunspots revealed, absent of hair. Exposure in the mirror, raw and bare, the gray under it all, the roots of the silver, perfect, wild, wise. And then I'll read one more. I could get to that. This is, I don't often get political in my writing, but I did, so you're welcome. After the last school shooting, we write. The song we know. I heard America singing at festival, nightclub, church, and school. I heard them singing this land was their land, the spacious skies of Las Vegas, Orlando, Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, sea to shining sea. I heard America singing. Can you see here by the dawn's early light? Those who remain, listen, strain, reach for the memory of missing songs. Thank you.
I'm nervous, and I'm Shannon. I don't know if he's nervous. I'm Shannon Ballam. I teach for the English department. I am now a senior lecturer. I just got my promotion. So thank you to several of you helped me get that promotion. My students wrote letters for me, and my friends and colleagues observed me and helped me, so thank you for that. My poems, I'll read 3 poems tonight, and it's a project that I started last January, or approximately, when I was teaching the advanced poetry writing class. Nate was in there, Brittany was in there, anybody else? And so it's kind of cool to watch how these things and to see how they've evolved. About 5 years ago, my youngest brother, Dylan Thomas, drank himself to death at age 24. And so I started writing poems about him that were called the obituary addendum poems. And now these have morphed into writing more about a character I imagine for Dylan to be. And the character's name is Thomas, and he has his own life, and he just has a new life. So that's what these are about. His best friend is a boy named Stubbs. And these are all based on real events that happened to Dylan, with embellishments, but okay. Thomas and the Clown. Thomas was afraid. No one believed him until the day he climbed to the top of the McDonald's tube slide and froze. Spying out the hole, he couldn't see his sisters who promised they'd be waiting. The playground at night empty now, except for the man-sized figure of the clown, its ghastly plastic smile, arms extended as if to embrace or strangle. Its whole body seemed to tremble with the fragile desire, like the Tin Man. Everyone who saw him knew he would never get a heart, not with the desperation smeared across his metal makeup face. He must have known. Desperation negates you. Thomas felt the shell of his face slipping off. Again he thought of the tide pool, the hermit crab dislodged from its shell, dragging its naked tail, just a small pink stub, a soul exposed. Behind it, claws open, a blue crab lunged. Even when his sisters called, "We'll catch you, Thomas, please come down," he couldn't. Stuck against the inside of the tube slide like a barnacle sucked to a whale, colossal dizzy ride. Thomas spied through the hole. The clown still smiled its smeared blood smile even when he cried. He flattened against the wall, breathing the piss smell of all the kids who'd been before. Then he heard the heavy foot thud on the metal ladder. His heart surged up his throat, small pulp trying to shove itself out. He grit his teeth till he tasted sand, jammed his fists to his eyes to smash back tears. Was the monster ahead, behind, already inside? Through the blur, toward the hands that may or may not be waiting, Thomas thrust himself, began to slide. Thomas and the sledding accident. There, bluing in snow, Thomas lay seesawed like a rag doll, his skull burning star fierce through the gash. A blossom of blood crowned his head, and in a royal daze he eyed baldly the sun, and mistaking the huge harsh face for his father's, hissed, "Where were you?" Stubbs' wail was distant. "Help! Thomas is dying!" Muffled in winter ether, muted like a kind of sweet cancer bobbing bland-faced in Grandma's lungs. Nobody knew she'd die, gasping, her nightgown flecked in fine crimson constellations they saw when Thomas and Stubbs spied through the crack in the bathroom door. With a blood-wadded tissue, Grandma blotted her wobbly smile. She gathered the boys to her lap where they melted against her soft body, her fragrance of strawberries, and she read them The Frog Prince, where the princess hurls the hideous frog against the wall. When he splats against the bricks, the spell breaks, transforming him into a thin, perfect, golden-haired prince who was never sad again. "Maybe we can break the spell," Stubbs said, his fat gut hanging over filthy sweatpants as they stood with their sleds at the top of the impossible hill. Nobody would ever see what Thomas could see now through the sting of his eyes. His own silky dark hair and a strip of his scalp hanging in clumps from the scrub oak bark. Thomas glared deep-pupiled at the sun, and he saw them, the spots, all the sun's bruises on its soft peach face, purple fingerprints shining on its cheeks. Embarrassing to be flawed, to be beaten, to be gone off at some stupid war when Grandma died, Thomas in his blood-bloom thought. You're no better than anybody else, you proud naked, you fat old son smothered in ugliness. I bet your grandma never loved you. Then the world darkened, sun eclipsed by his father's face, wild, distorted, terror rolling his lazy eye round and round in its socket. Thomas saw him plainly and from all sides, could feel all his father's bruises, and he ached to suck it all back in, the blood, the hate, how he'd aimed straight at that tree. Now he had to see his father staggering in the dazzling clarity of what he'd done. He had to watch him for the first time sobbing, falling to his knees. This one's called Operation Jasper. Flushed with terror, adolescent venom, the boys bashed in the back window of the vacant summer cabin and like sun-hot snakes poured inside, their fanged electricity sizzling in the kitchen where Thomas and Stubbs screamed, "4!" smashing the glass tabletop with golf clubs as the Bischoff boys tore through cupboards, raking out the plates and glasses until the air glittered with shattering. Glass-eyed, panting, Thomas and Stubbs blasted into the living room and froze. Before them a stuffed black bear posed in mid-step on a polished mahogany platform next to a fake fir tree and faded silk ferns. His lips were smudged into a strange smile, the taxidermist's terrible, delicate touch that said, "It is fine to be dead." "It's Jasper," Stubbs gasped, the name they gave to the bear from their favorite story, where Johnny Orchard finds an orphan cub and feeds him lumps of maple sugar until he gets so big he eats all the meat in the town smokehouse and guzzles every gallon of their maple syrup. On a rainy day, in the misty morning, Johnny is forced to lead Jasper into the dark grove to shoot him. "There is no other way," Johnny's father told him, laying a firm hand on Johnny's thin shoulder. Thomas rushed, embraced Jasper's huge neck, buried his face in the bristly fur, stroked the fine prickled muzzle above his smile. Stubbs rubbed his meaty hands along Jasper's hunched back, caressed every vertebrae in his spine, linked like a fine gold necklace. Stubbs placed his foot next to Jasper's giant clawed paw and saw they were the same size and shaped like graceful Japanese fans. "I found matches and cigarettes," Jared shouted from the kitchen. "Hey, no, those are mine," Jeremy hissed, and then the dull thunk of punching and crunching as the boys rolled in broken glass. "Get off me, you prick!" Thomas licked the bear's lacquered incisor. "It tastes like maple sugar, Stubbs." Stubbs licked the scratchy round edge of Jasper's ear. "It tastes like the dark grove in the rain." "Oh my God, we are so fucked," Jeremy howled. "The police, they're gonna find our fingerprints." Frantic fumbling in the kitchen. "We're going to prison! We are going to prison!" And then the Bischoff boys were dousing everything, the fat black couch, the rocking chair, the rugs, the curtains, with gasoline. "We have to get him out of here," Thomas, trembling, whispered. "He's our brother." They held their breath and began to shove Jasper, his crushing weight, inch by inch toward the picture window. Their sneakers squeaked and slipped on the wood floor. Their eyes bulged, nearly popping from the sockets. "Push," Thomas wheezed. "Push, push!" Tears leaking down his crimson cheeks. Oh, how the fire climbed the walls, fist over fist, from all sides, amber, blue, white, blooming, and the bitter smoke, its sinuous body, twisting gray ribbons around their ankles as they heaved forward. Thomas moaned, the fine rosebud of his lips singed, beginning to blister. Stubbs whimpered as the fire's flicking tongue scorched his bare legs. They could smell the black smell of their own hair melting. But there was no other way. They kept moving, shoving Jasper toward his new life, where he would never be alone again, the flames at their backs relentlessly licking. Thank you.
I'm Brock. Whenever I do a reading, I try to come up with some kind of thread or theme that connects the various things I'm going to read. And I realize, and it's always an after-the-fact thing, but then I make the claim, oh, I thought of this months ago, and I crafted all these poems to go with that theme. This time I realized that the theme is, they're not about me. And if you've heard me read before, you know that that's a unique thing. I'm not the subject of any of these, so be glad that you're here. This first one stole its title from Elizabeth Bishop poem, One Art, which is a masterpiece. This is not a masterpiece, but maybe this will convince you to read the original, which is, definitely worth doing. This is about one of our neighbors before Christmas. One Art. Giant blow-up dog with Santa hat rises on the neighbor's lawn next to waving, smiling snowman and bowler. This year joined by giant gingerbread man, whose head morphs into a drooping poot of elf hat, pointing to where an unabashedly plastic Christmas tree manhandles a much smaller Santa whose pants dangle in the teeth of a hound. This is all true. Pooh Bear is a veteran. The sun has bleached his honeyed plastic of feeble lemon, but the alert dachshund with reindeer horns is new, as are the giant red and green candy canes lining the walkway as if awaiting the touch of an elven hand. As impossible to satisfy as any artist, our neighbor deftly wields a long-handled sponge mop to extend his reach, circling his front yard maple with red lights ever higher. They mock the few remaining crab apples on our trees, now translucent pink, fermenting for the enjoyment of the next horde of starlings. Is our neighbor's collage of inflatable holiday icons as creative as tattooing Abe's proclamation on a boner, or photographing Barbie in 1,272 different outfits? More people will marvel at my neighbor's lawn than will read my poem, though his house is third from last on a dead-end street. His snippets of Carol's tape loop will vex more sleeping souls than my cage-rattling screeds. In this smoggy inversion, I'll see more of his stars projecting on his garage than I will real ones. As second-floor voyeur, I have the best, perhaps the only complete view of the lawn and its occupants, wondering what Freud or Foucault would make of this scene, connected to Christmas only by commercialism and to sex only by Pooh's green honeypot. I lone cheer my neighbor as he pumps Scooby-Doo hard. Job done, he inspects his work, Pomeranian under his arm. 3 houses down, a competitor flashes a gauntlet. The lights in his walkway candy canes dance to the beat as Jingle Bells floods the street. Actually, in retrospect, I wrote that whole poem just so I could get across the line. He pumps Scooby-Doo hard. It works. So this is one that we do a lot of hiking, and we were going up Double Top last year. We actually never made it to either of the tops because of sort of the reason, well, because of what happens in this poem, really. It's called Wandering Off. A barrier across the trail, a tree felled by winter storms, stymies cattle, forces them to choose their way. Leaders bowl straight ahead, barking their shins in the snarl of branches, lowing with frustration, gradually beating their way through. Followers stall at the blowdown, balk and back and circle, find the shortest way round, create a tight bypass. The rare cow spots commotion ahead. Recalling previous detours, it leaves the trail early to curve out into the forest, snuffle fragrant sage, munch succulent ferns and cool spruce shade, follow an arc of sensations, never returning to the trail. This is a new one that's not in the book, and it's a response to a prompt that Shannon gave down in Zion when she was doing a poetry workshop down there. It started with sound, and it ended with sound, but it's called Spring Songs. Star-nosed mole bows big viol, Voles moan tenor and alto. A hawk screes from a ponderosa. Snakes and red squirrels cackle. Atop the heap, field mice squeak. Croon or croak, lavender throats, opened by ominous pools. Speckled dace in weird abundance crowd the brook, float, grope above the pond's obsidian depths. Goats glide, pungent, tolerant, smite shadows of cold-cocked claws, fearing fur and feathers. Fragrant of rot drifts from each step. Some mistake rodent songs for wolves or yotes or distant cats in heat, but they're more like hermit thrushes, tortured and trained and sent underground to muffle liquid melodies in dirt. And this last one, well, I used to be part of this poem, but I'm not anymore, so that's probably a game. It's called The Scabs on Haig's Face. Haig was captain, president, key man on campus when the big bag of black powder and M80 casings arrived from New Jersey. He made them up with his neighbors Tom and Pete, then pondered the pile of extra powder until Pete popped a match. Haig lost eyebrows, lashes, the need to shave before his 20s, and for a time the spotlight. But when he reappeared 3 weeks later, he told the huddle that as he peeled the scabs off his face, he ate them. Thank you.
I only have 3, so I put a time away for that. All right, I'm Isaac Timm. I'm a graduate from USU, and these are persona poems about Caliban from The Tempest, because I've always felt beastly most of the time. I have a hard time talking to people, and sometimes I'm a little angry, so.
Sounds like the rest of us.
So the first one is about my second crush, and one thing about having a crush on a poet is every time you pick up her book, you can renew that crush and no one cares. Caliban discovers Emily Dickinson. He first saw her lying languid on the shelf, in pages with more weight than she ever had in life. A slight feather that moving swayed, that you, staying silent, noticed. Caliban knew silence, as he knew his skin, as he knew the sound of raindrops on stone, or the time of night when crickets sing. It was a relationship of silences, of glances, slight smiles, a muffled laugh at a planted verse. It danced through the stack like a bee. And second one, I was late to language. I have several serious learning disabilities, and I didn't learn to read until I was 13. So I have kind of an angry battle with language. I always have. And that's why I'm drawn to Caliban, because there's a line, "Red curse for you teaching me language." And I'm wondering if my teacher really wanted to teach me language. But this is inspired by Derek Walcott. It's called Before Language. Back in the simple days when there was no pressing need for words, when the horizon was a line of red on the breast of birds, when there was no greater or lesser light, when the stars were clouds of sparkling flies and the arm of the Milky Way a flock of escaping birds. In the mouth of the creek the cypress moaned on stilted legs, and I hid amongst mother's medicines, drying sea grapes, kelp, the bones of birds. Her lullaby mimicked the leaves of the gomer trees, their green fins dancing under the rain, and the sea swift's call above other birds. Mother's hand moved across the sand, pictures of swamps, rivers, lagoons. I jumped up, spun, made the sound of water over rocks, laughing birds. Miranda draws across the page, 2 humped scrawls, then a line, wings over the horizon. I giggle and correct, ink the feather of songbirds. She slaps my hand, black splatters the page. She speaks slow, no, not drawing, but writing, B, letter B, found in words, babble, bad, brute. I throw the quill away, bury my face in my hands, see Prospero, hear his voice, poor savage babbles nonsense, daughter teach him words. And this is kind of inspired all the Caliban poems. This is kind of a serial comic thing from William Tolbridge, which is a friend of Shannon's. And this is what got me started. And I first started writing Caliban going to college, because when I first went to college, I was from a small town, and I felt like everything was alien and weird. So this is Caliban briefly takes up smoking. Caliban liked big tobacco's modality, fill the world with smokers. So we joined up, accessorized, bought a brushed metal Zippo, a biker jacket with metal studs, purchased the cigarettes with the Russian comrade art. So when the beautiful people came to him for a fix, he could look hip, an extra level of sophistication for their satisfaction. Strangely enough, with a cigarette in his mouth, Caliban always had something to say, a joke, a clever turn of phrase to attract the blonde, as they huddled in a group like pigwins, or under an awning, or slouched against a wall like lurkers, aiming to pass off secret rocket plans. And he would have continued, by God, how he loved to blow smoke in the faces of budding young Prosperos who marched forthrightly across campus with wagging fingers. Was your judgmental bullshit worth the second-hand smoke? Caliban would return with a sneer. But one night, with the amazing blonde in his dorm, he reached for his Coke, but instead grabbed an ash can and got a swallow of 4 days of butts and backwash. He fell over gasping like a landed fish, and the blonde, trapped and disgusted, leapt over him like a deer in flight as he retched brown evil. It was then that Caliban decided smoking wasn't for him.
So place has always mattered to me. When I first moved to Cache Valley and I wanted to go back to my hometown, which is New York, I panicked when I couldn't find my passport because the places seemed so different to me that I thought they were two separate countries. So this poem is called Two Lives. Had I not migrated to this northern Utah mountain valley where the alpenglow shimmers over hoary peaks, where canyon trails wend through sagebrush and pine, where red-tailed hawks perch on quaking aspen boughs, and deer trek across the homestead from winding stream to ample garden, where mornings I tromp through snowdrifts in leather work boots and rugged wool socks, I would still be dashing along sidewalks, climbing subway stairs in sturdy black shoes, standing in stocking feet on stained squares of cardboard while emigre cobblers repair heels and soles in fusty holes in the wall. I'd still be exploring botany, birding, backpacking in the main branch of the New York Public Library with its tiny elevators that lift into radiant light books from closed stacks. This next poem just requires maybe a word about New York City plumbing. Some of you may know this, but in the tenements in New York City, oftentimes the bathtub is in the kitchen. And realtors now market it as a tub chin, so it's a portmanteau word. Okay, this poem is called Those Years I Lived. Those years I lived with Nils on the edge of Lafayette and Spring. We lingered in his bedroom where the single window limned a murky air shaft. A rubber tree inclined against the ledge, its succulent leaves serving as shades. Poised on pillows redolent of musk, Nils read Milton, Mom, or Man, while I translated Wittig and Woolf. Mornings, we spread the New York Times among us. Evenings, Nils baked bread while I bathed beside him in the tub. Later, we replaced the wooden staves, covered them with oilcloth, and ate. Then I washed the dishes while Nils washed himself. Where were we then? Nolita, Chinatown, Soho. Borders morphed at the sway of those who named. We named ourselves. We are that we are. Not divinity, just intimates who shared a spectral space. The night before his prostate surgery, Nils hovered by the door jamb. If you want a child, he said, now's the time. I did not. But sometimes when I tarried by the sink with its separate hot and cold taps, I fancied paths to merge the single streams. I have two more. This one is called Semantics. It has an original title, which maybe I could tell you afterwards. At the cusp of dawn, and still in her long tartan bathrobe, my wife is drinking coffee amid the redbuds in our garden, when I offer to read her the poem Route 6 by Stanley Kunitz, in which he claims that in every house of marriage there's room for an interpreter, in which he extends the theme of misunderstanding to the avowal that his cat Celia, transcendental, was past mistress of Hottentot. Not Hot-to-Trot, I'm on the verge of explaining, but my wife is already beaming. By the time light glazes the eastern sky and Celia sniffs the brine-spiked air, my wife, concerned that his wife's song about loving or leaving hints at my own secret motives. Why else would I be reading her this poem, she concludes, is crying into the cup of already brackish black coffee from which I'd been hoping to sip. And the original title of this poem was My Wife Cries When I Read to Her Poems. And the last poem, I've been told, is either X-rated or G-rated, so I suppose maybe it's both. It's called Don't Be Fooled. Don't be fooled by evening primrose, that librarian flower with tight bun, somber mien, and stiff ruche of a skirt. By day, she appears blue-nosed as the mark on her name tag, which hangs from her long, slender neck. True to her Greek name, Enothera, she imbibes deep red wine at dusk. Veins swell, and she, in Minoan eruption, unfurls her petals to reveal lush golden pollen deep in the whorls of her bloom. Thank you.
Thanks, Poetry at 3. Give him a hand. I guess I could tell you who I am. Some of you might not know me. I'm Star of Coulbrooke. I'm the Logan City Poet Laureate, the coordinator of Helicon West, and the person in charge, so they tell me, of Poetry at 3. I run the Writing Center at Utah State University, which is now 5 writing centers. And I have all these amazing people who do all the work, and I just stand back and glow about it because it's so wonderful. We have lots of open mic readers, and it looks like we have enough time. Do not read anything for more than exactly 7 minutes or we will clap you off the stage. Because we'd like to hear everyone. So if you have something that's more than 7 minutes, read half of it and come back next time, or the next and the next, depending on how long it is. My Mitch, the guy in the vest with the long silver hair, is back there monkeying around with the books because he's selling them for us. And so if you want a book, remember Poetry at 3 is $5 for the new green edition. And then there are other editions there from past years that you're welcome to purchase, 2 for $5. So for $10 you could have 3 volumes of Poetry at 3, and there is no better deal than that on the face of the earth. Our first open mic reader tonight is Nicole Craycroft. Is that how you say it? Nicole? Okay. And then we'll have Ronald Jensen, and then Susan Andersen. Come up. What? Oh, let me tell them that. If you don't want to be videoed, be sure to just nod at Amias and tell him don't do it.
Hello. This is my first time performing for an open
Welcome.
mic. I feel like I'm sinning because I did not prepare poetry. It's a short story and it has no title.
All right.
So I'm just gonna start. It was mid-morning. The sun, fresh from its nightly slumber, was bright. No, overexposed. Martin was sitting behind the wheel of his 1950 Pontiac Sedanet, a beautiful deep azure blue. The multi-spoked wheels spinning along with almost dirt-free 4-inch white walls, humming a perfect harmony on Route 50, created a soothing calm. The original paint he'd helped keep in pristine condition by the discipline of his father glinted in the morning light. Never forget to wax, he'd always say. Since those years of turtle wax and terry cloth, Martin had grown to master the technique of polishing the blue exterior like that of applying oil to a sunbathing model for a centerfold photo shoot. Too little and you've wasted your time. Too much and the once perfect body you began caressing will age too rapidly. The mirroring chrome of the front and rear bumpers and the halos of the round headlights were shining brightly. The scary grin of the teeth-bearing front grille used to frighten him as a little boy, but now that he was an adult, they looked as if they were a smiling salesman, showing all his pearly whites to close a perfect sale. He knew the look of his family heirloom would make not only his father proud, but his grandfather squeal like a schoolgirl, even as manly as he always tried to be. The smooth leather seats felt cool and slick under the seat of his trousers. He didn't understand why new cars would sell the discomfort of cloth to cheapen costs just to make an extra buck. His father always told him that leather is elegant and represented high class. He tilted his head back and took a slow, deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. Fields on either side of the highway stretched as far as the eye could see, only interrupted by the bright blue of the sky. Everything was perfect. Oldies were playing softly on the background from a radio station he had picked up, lucky to have picked up anything out there. Martin stroked his hand over the dimples and binding of the steering wheel slowly. He wrapped his fingers around the curvature, feeling the unique shape with the entirety of his hands. A warmth filled him that he hadn't felt in years. He let out a sigh and leaned forward, embracing the helm. His car had been in his family for over 60 years, passed down from his grandfather to his father and then to him after his father's death. He had grown up with this car, caring for it, learning every nook and cranny slowly to make sure he never left a detail untouched. It had become his one and only. Reaching over, he turned up the volume a little and hummed along to the music. Nothing could be more perfect than this moment. He had experienced so many bad moments, compounding one after another. He deserved this blissful reprieve. Nothing had been the same since that accident 5 years prior that had left him with traumatic brain injury. At least that's what the doctor told him. He didn't really remember any of it. And that was the catch, wasn't it? Unable to work due to disability, unable to remember what rendered him disabled, unable to function without the ungodly amounts of prescription medications the doctor forced on him. The old, familiar bitterness started creeping in. He felt a cold, slow kindling rage. Martin closed his eyes again, briefly, shaking his head a little to clear the unwanted thoughts and feelings. He didn't need all those medications. He hadn't been taking them for months and was feeling fine. Shaking his head one more time to clear it, he breathed in, filling his lungs to capacity and then letting it seep out between his teeth. He let his thoughts wander to her. He had met her at the pharmacy, refilling his numerous prescriptions. She was always so kind to him, so helpful, so lovely. His heart swelled when he thought of their connection. The last time he had been in for his refills, she had touched his hand and looked into his eyes. He felt a tingle on his skin that he hadn't felt for a long time, a longing in his heart to be close to her, to make her laugh, to watch her eyes light up when she saw him. That was 3 months ago. He had skipped the last few refillings and had been detoxing them from his system. Being on all those meds was like living life behind a screen door. He wanted to feel again. He wanted to love again. Martin hadn't seen her since, well, until last night. Then, as if the universe could feel his heart, the song Sugar, Sugar by the Archies came on. It was a classic tune from 1969. He sang along, Sugar, honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. Turning his gaze to the passenger seat, he reached out to touch her cheek. Rebecca. She was huddled on the floorboards underneath the dash, duct tape binding her ankles and wrists, as well as covering her mouth. Last night's makeup had dried in streaks down her face, settling into the slight wrinkles around her eyes. She flinched away from his hand as it neared her face. Honey, oh, sugar, sugar, you are my candy girl, and you've got me wanting you. He continued to sing, smiling at her.
Hi. Got the poem of mine called The Toilet. The greedy man saw a leprechaun walking down the road. He said, I'd like to have a pot of gold. The leprechaun said, it's gold that you like, and follow this rainbow if you don't mind the hike. So he followed the rainbow till it came to an end, hoping to find what's the money to spend. When he reached the end, what did he see? An elementary school surrounded by trees. The man said, where's the gold? I've come a long way, and now I see you didn't pay. But the kind of pig and said, you fool, you can't get richer from finding a school. The very fine children, as sweet as pie, will give you love and joy, the money can't buy. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. At the spring luncheon for the Center for Women and Gender the other day, Star gave a beautiful talk about poetry as common language. And at the end of her talk, she gave us 5 minutes to write a poem. And so I sat down and wrote this little background. On October 2nd of last year, to kick off Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And I'm doing very well now, and my real hair is about this long. And it's really white. And so, sometime in the next few weeks you might see me walking around with really white hair, but this poem is about one of the many experiences that I've had, and it's called Day 15. He shaves my head with such care, not like he might shave dog's fur in summer sun, or his own face every day times 40 years. No, I am goddess, his goddess, as clippers hum. He shaves it the day after my oncologist grabs a lock and pulls, surprising me. A whole clump of hair in her fist. Yes, she says, right on schedule for day 14. Clippers buzz around my ears. I am not afraid. Hair falls to bathroom floor, dark auburn on light maple. I study my head in the mirror, turning this way and that. No goddess here, not really, though he will still hold me at night like I'm Venus. I'm a badass, I say, as he sweeps.
Thank you, Sue. And Ron, I think that one's on a broadside, isn't it? And you memorized it. I love it. And Nicole, wow, you really had people going. Next we have Amy Blakeley, Erin Timm, and Millie Tullis.
Okay, I'm going to see if I don't actually have enough time to do both of these, but since it's Poetry Month, I'm going to start with the poem, which I found lingering in a notebook with the note, in which I imitate Britt McDonald. So, you've been warned. Submission. Pull her body apart to disconnect her mind. Hook fingers into her insecurities. Wrench hard to show her a pathway out her head if she's willing to follow. Remind her what she isn't, what she's missing, what she can't be. The litany of scars seared across her skin don't define her. Reward her. She craves pain to remind herself she isn't dead yet. And then in a completely different change of pace, it's actually a creative nonfiction, like a flash creative nonfiction. It was following a prompt that Sean Andersen did at Community Writing Center, and lots of work has gone into it. And it's called Conversations We're Not Having. My husband claims one end of the couch as he plays Assassin's Creed. I anchor the other while reading from my Kindle, legs stretched into vines across his thighs. My phone, tucked under my left leg, vibrates, making me jump. Darth Vader, Mom, are you home safe? If I were a better daughter, I would answer, but I'm not. Darth Vader, are you and the kids okay? She always leaves Ben out for some reason. I'm not sure if she just doesn't like him, or if she doesn't like that he provided me with an avenue of escape she never got to take. I'm still ignoring her. Darth Vader, Amy, where are you? Are the kids okay? Her texts are getting closer together. The longer I don't answer, I know how this cycle works. I will ignore her, she will get frustrated, she'll begin calling me, I won't answer. She will have my brothers begin contacting me on her behalf. Darth Vader, what did you have for dinner? You'd think at some point she'd figure out my failure to answer her is perhaps a sign that I don't want to talk to her. But she doesn't. Darth Vader, Amy, why are you not talking to me? The first time my period coated my underwear in brown sludge, I needed a mother to hug me and whisper comfort before helping me navigate the differences between Tampax and Always. Even more, I needed reinforcements when the boys started breaking into the bathroom, but Grandma said, just give them a show, Amy. When AJ told everyone he was gay and that he just pretended I was a boy because it isn't like she makes it hard, I waited for the earth to swallow me whole when Greg said, so you can teach her to wear a dress and put on makeup like a real girl, and she can teach you how to suck dick. I needed to soak in warmth for a while, sobbing into your neck after Kristen made me feel dirty for kissing her before cutting me out of her life. And when word got out in the hallway and Jerome cornered me, asking if it was true I kissed girls, and then used me as a birthday present for his girlfriend to experiment. I needed someone to explain that to. But you weren't there. When I met the wrong girl at the right time, the truth of her dangling from the roof of my mouth, daring my tongue to claim ownership and give a name to what we had, I didn't have anyone to tell it to. So I scrawled these stories across my skin with the edges of curling irons and razor blades, wrote my truth in blood and washed it away still wet and red. When Andy tucked his halo into his back pocket, dropped his jeans, and forced my consent before raping me, I needed a safe space. Instead, underwear sticky slick and pressing cold against my skin, I biked home, the fall air just skidding towards chill. Words build up inside me with nowhere to go, and when you ask me if I've talked to Andy lately, the pressure collapses and I echo through the emptiness left behind. Has it been 10 years? Because you make it feel brand new. Where were you when I was learning how to coat my voice in steel and remove barbs from my skin without flinching? What about when I was busy covering bruises and broken bones with words? What things did you deem more worthy of your time than I was? Why do you think I need your attention now that I'm grown, have a husband, have a family, have a life completely separated from you? My phone vibrates, emitting a tinny rendition of the Imperial March. I huff loudly and stare at the backlit screen, muttering curse words. Ben asks, wouldn't it be easier to just block her? I could, but then I would have to do it again every month. And I'd have to block everyone else in my family so she can't use them too. And what would happen if there was a real emergency or she died? Darth Vader, Amory, answer your phone, I'm your mother. What other weapon would I dig out of my back pocket to torture myself into feeling guilty for gambling on a chance to live instead of folding under the pressure? This time, when the phone rings, I answer. I talk to her like we're strangers who've never met before.
Hi guys. Okay. I don't know how this. Oh, like that. Okay. So I've been trying to write about this for a while, and it seems that a new sort of traumatic experience is happening in our family right now, and that sort of unleashed the ability to write about this one that happened years and years ago. So yay for that. All right. Okay. It's called Miscarriage. Oops, and I'm on the wrong sheet. Okay, Miscarriage. Before you fell apart, left my womb in broken pieces, I panicked at the thought of you. Looked around our studio apartment, trying to figure out where to stick a bassinet, then crib, high chair. Was this why you shattered, blood running down the shower drain? Because in a moment of weakness, I tasted doubt? Did I send the wrong message? Give you an eviction notice when all I meant to do was modify the lease? And Mother's Day? Did you choose that day to leave? A first and final, fuck you, Mom? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Millie. Gotta find these. Okay, so this is a poem that's a Craigslist ad for a muse seeking a poet. So it's called Muse Seeking Poet. Requirements: frequent brooding, crazy sex drive. If married, must be unhappy, economically and educationally privileged enough to make me his Venus, to show off my miraculous birth, how I came to him all ex nihilo. Contact: cannot host but open to travel. Say, I want to feed the muse in the subject line so that I know you are real. Do not contact with unsolicited services or offers. Do not send dick pics. Send the whole of you, peeled back, slit gleaming, fresh skin, crying my name. And this is a poem called Mormon Teenagers. not as fun as it sounds. First boy taught me to say, I'm sorry for my breasts. I'm sorry I grew them, they are naughty seeds. I'm sorry for my ass, the way my flesh is too much for fingers. My apologies are written in pink folds. See, I am buckling down. I am making space. When God placed his name on my tongue, when you put flesh in my mouth, my name, always sorry. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that one of the things I love about poets is that poets use all the language and they use it so amazingly well. Thank you, you three. Next we have Dakota Devalle, Alyssa North, and Kyle Pfeiffer. Yes, that's right. I skipped you, Suzanne, but I'll get to you next.
Hi, my name is Dakota. I am in Shannon's fiction writing class, and she encouraged us to share a little piece. So here I am. This is my first time reading in a group like this, so my heart's going about 90 miles an hour. Has been since I signed my name on the list, so thank you for the encouragement, Millie. I probably wouldn't have made it to the list. But, so this is a segment of a piece that I'm writing for Shannon's class. It's titled John Luke and Jenny Hodgkins. You won't really get to meet Jenny in this piece, but she's a sweetheart, so tune in for further revisions. My 2005 Toyota whatever was pumping out enough CO2 to paint the other cars on the road with the same pollution spatter mine wore. I backed out of the chipstone driveway, savoring the moment where the tires met the smooth, stable asphalt. A rainbow sticker frowned at me from the rearview mirror. My seatbelt held firmly across my chest. I normally didn't care all that much for seatbelts. I liked riding along with carefree and abandon. Wind tossing my hair as it blew in from the open window. This morning, the window was firmly set against the gray, polluted air. My seatbelt clipped into the tiny mechanism that was single-handedly responsible for saving countless lives, earning it monumental government and nonprofit marketing. I rolled up to where my street intersected with Main. Cars zipped by, dragging along monoxide tails. My eyes flicked down to the clock on the dash, 8:03. My heart accelerated, despite the red light, my left foot almost releasing the brake pedal to follow. How was I that late? I hadn't overslept. I'd skipped breakfast, as usual. It didn't matter if I was late this morning. It was easy for me to forget that, for a bit. My oncologist had recently prescribed 3 to 6 months of carefree living, so running late didn't make any real difference. I guess you could call that a side effect from my prescription, that significant shift of priorities. No one was going to reprimand me if I walked in 15 minutes late to the office. Instead, they'd accost me with the pity-filled looks that had started as soon as I'd handed a copy of that prescription to my boss. It had doubled as a resignation letter of sorts, signed by the doctor instead of me. His cracked signature at the bottom had been so mashed, sharp, and illegible it very well could have been signed by Santa Claus. No one would have been able to tell the difference. I'd said my last goodbye to Santa about a month ago. It had been one of those, I'll see you when I see you goodbyes, where you can't bring yourself to say goodbye forever. So you lie instead, hoping fate will take notice of your petty attempt to leave the door open just a crack. But knowing in your traitorous heart that fate had already walked away, his work finished ahead of schedule. The flashing brake lights in front of me signaled for me to reel in my thoughts, focus on the road, on driving, on getting from point A to point B. I eased to a stop, waiting for another red light. I wonder how many hours of my life have been siphoned off by red lights. 30 seconds here, 2 minutes there. They had to add up. Who ran these things anyway? Who had the responsibility for forcing some to stop while others sped forward, without any thought for those who sat at a standstill? Maybe no one was in control of the start and stop. Maybe it was all just some pre-coded formula. Green. I rolled forward. My immediate destination was a large brick building with big names of people I had never met, but whose stamped signatures appeared on each of my bi-weekly paychecks. The morning's journey fulfilled, I parked. Across the street I could see the little convenience store with the polite clerk where I'd buy my midday hot dog and chips. No use twisting the knife with some half-hearted attempt at a diet. The prescription was for a carefree life, not one of anxious calorie counting and meticulous meal planning. I glanced around and saw I was the only living thing in a black field populated to capacity with my coworkers' cars. Great. Every set of eyes would be inside, waiting in subconscious anticipation to assault me with pity as I walked through the front door. Sure enough, as I crossed the threshold, their gazes crowded in, smothering me. I pressed through the onslaught. I don't know why they give me all their pity. It wasn't helpful. It didn't embolden or warm me. It just gave me uncomfortable pause, just like the traffic lights, and siphoned out a few more seconds from my tank. My wooden desk chair also refused a friendly embrace, instead remaining stubbornly cold and hard as I scooted up to my desk, piled high with reports to process before I punched out at closing time. There was no way I'd be getting through all of them today. Mercifully, there was always tomorrow. Good morning, John. I looked up as the greeter continued on his way, not pausing for a reply. I knew without seeing that Mark's face would bear a tired expression. A perpetual broken smile would sit there, his feeble attempt to fend off the same stares I just avoided. He had to get to his reporting. He had to take care of his kids at home. No time to pause and risk remembering. Mark had been unreachable the day Jenny's time had run out. He hadn't been there, so I had to sit there at Jenny's bedside as the little girl clutched my fingers in her small hand. Mark didn't have to bear the pain of feeling her fighting break. I had to be there for a daughter I couldn't even claim. I had charged out the front doors of the hospital as buzzing motors pulled the doors out of my way, as though I deserved special treatment. I looked up from my bare feet on the ground and my draping paper gown to see a blue sky, green trees, and small songbirds darting back and forth, all oblivious to the moment. Their joyful tweetings fell on my ears. I didn't smile at the melodies. They bit and stung in their innocent mockery. The city stretched out below the hospital's hillside perch. There, splayed across the skyline, was slapped the greatest mockery of all. A rainbow leaked its 7 colors as it arched, the hues mixing together in staunch rebellion of the sharp lines that had held the colors of Jenny's rainbows in their even segments. Jenny loved drawing the bows in solid, distinct, crayon-drawn lines. Those drawings had been strong. This wound in the sky bled out colors. Her drawings had always held perfect hope in their solid, even lines, and this rainbow bridge to the future washed hues over the lines that held that hope in place. Jenny had lost. Cancer had won. Cancer would always win. I was going home. I had a prescription for 6 months of carefree living crumpled deep in my back pocket. Thank you.
Suzanne, hang on. I skipped you, so
Okay.
I'll get to you next first.
Okay.
Okay,
We got it.
Okay, my name is Alyssa. This is the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life.
Welcome.
Okay, so this is basically about an abusive relationship. It's called 10 Ways He Almost Ruined Me. 1. The one time I remember falling off my bike, I was 8, and I had slid on the rocks in my front yard. I wasn't wearing a helmet, and I smashed my head so hard into the ground that I knocked my front teeth out. I cried for 3 hours before my grandma had caught on that I was just crying so she'd give me more popsicles. He was the same way. 2. I forgot the dance at my 8th grade recital, and I stood on stage in front of the whole school, knees buckling. My mom told me no one noticed, but the looks that were passed through the school hallway said otherwise. It was my first string of embarrassment. I wish I would have known that when I met him, it wouldn't be the last time I'd feel ashamed. 3. The divorce that ripped apart the walls of my family, the broken window pane that prevented any of my friends from ever setting foot in my house again. I can still remember the voices of every cop I've ever spoken to, and it makes me think of prom night, because the divorce that wrecked my home was nothing compared to what he did to me. 4. When my stepbrother's mom killed herself in the canyon behind our house, I didn't quite understand the effect it would have on a family that wasn't yet built. But I remember my heart breaking, and the dull ache still hasn't left. I still have his suicide note, folded in a box in the back of my closet. He just wanted to scare me. 5. The travesty of the school parking lot with bumper-to-bumper cars and a hit and run. I remember when a girl in my grade rolled over the hood of a moving van. All she had was a broken wrist. The day I slid his ring back into his hand and stepped out of the car, he started driving before I was even gone. If I can't have you, no one can. 6. The first time my cousin had sex, she made me promise not to tell anyone, but the words slipped out of my mouth during a dinner conversation. It took her 6 months to forgive me, and even now she still throws dirty looks my way at parties. When I wouldn't sleep with him every time he asked, he told me no one would ever love me like he would. 7. My freshman year, I spent $10 a week on vending machine snacks to shove down my starving best friend's throat.
I didn't understand her need for a perfect body image until a year later when my cousin had to spoon feed me soup in an attempt to get me healthy again. He just wanted me to be perfect. 8. I spent the first 2 years of high school drowning in a sea of laughs and inside jokes. Popularity was key for a girl who used to always be stuck in a shell. It only took 2 months before I was a loner again. They all saw it, but all I could see was him. 9. The day I was born, I developed a lifelong connection with my mother. The woman who would be my best friend until the day I died. I never wanted to resent my mother because she gave me the best life I'd ever had, but I lied to her for 8 months about him. I'll always remember the disappointment on her face when she caught me with him, but I was too scared to leave him because of how he might react. 10. I was taught from a young age that it's okay to be afraid of the monsters under my bed, a fear I developed from Disney movies. A monster spray would take them away and the nightmares would fade from my head, but it's been a year and I still take 10 deep breaths when I drive home on weekends. Disney movies didn't tell me that monsters could be people who were supposed to protect you, but he made it hard to sleep sometimes. It's been a year since the last time we spoke. There are still some days when the effects of his abuse are so real that I cower under my covers, afraid that he might find me even though I'm 200 miles away. But then there are other days when I don't think of him at all. Days like today, when I'm driving with the windows down as the sun kisses my cheeks and it's almost like he never existed. He thought he could ruin me, but he didn't.
Okay, I just have one poem that I wanted to share. It's called, the title is A Heart to Heart Between a Young Father and His Future Self. Sorry, I'm also really nervous. What about the aftermath? When it's time to put away the tables and chairs and throw out the pizza boxes and spent beer cans. When the guests all leave and take their smiles and their congratulations with them. When you both need to drive home, but you're both too drunk on validation and too young to be driving. Where's the village? They said this takes a village to clean up. Now that you're both too tired for each other and of each other. But what about the after party? When the somebodies arrive, when we play the deeper cuts, the oldies, the sips of scotch and Merlot we had to wait for. And there's finally enough room in this empty house to breathe. And we both are high on our own supply of validation. Where did the village go? Who cares? It doesn't take a village to keep a single seat warm.
So next we have Suzanne, is it Yeltin?
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll have Sadie Lindheart, I believe, and then our grand finale open mic reader for tonight is Nate Hardy. Okay, Suzanne.
Thank you. I've always, since I was 3, I've always had a real love for trains and railroads. When I was a very small child, I rode a train for a very long distance with my mother in a very uncomfortable, real hard seat. And I don't know, trains touch my heart. I don't know why, but they do. It's called The Song of the Railroad. What is the song of the railroad? Is it the driving of the spikes into the rails? Irish, white, black, Chinamen wrote the story of the rail with each sledgehammer blow that mated spike to rail. But what is the railroad's song? Every mile of track laid down was covered with the sweat, tears, and blood of the men and women who plied their trade each day along the plains from east to west. What would they have us know about them if they could rise up from their earthen tombs and speak to us of what it was really like? The dust and downpours, the snows and mighty unforgiving winds that drove them on and on and on. Rivers that waited for bridges, mountains standing in defiance, a cruel sun that baked and burned human flesh. Huddled masses of men, women, and children in tents waiting out freezing cold, some never living to see the spring. Underpaid, underfed, overworked, their bodies lie beside the path where the rails were laid. Talking wires that baffle the red man. Is there no end to the white man's power? Syphilis, smallpox, tuberculosis, injuries that rip bodies apart, now turned to dust, now forgotten. The singing rails, a life cry to some, a death knell to others. Old mighty rails, at what human cost were you laid? What would you have us know if you could speak? Would you tell us the story of the men and women who built you? Do you remember them? Or would you only cry about the graffiti you now wear upon your back and sides, put there by people who no longer remember the pain and suffering of those that built you by the song of their sledgehammers? Do you even care as you race into the night with your own song of clickety-clack, clickety-clack, no one who built me will ever come back? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sadie, and today marks 8 months to the day that I lost someone very close to me. And I wanted to share this poem that I wrote to not just express my grief, but to remember that he lived. This is called Headstone. Today, I'm missing you more than I miss the person I was when I was with you. I thought that by now, when someone says your name or shares it, I wouldn't wince and thought of you and think of the cemetery where your body is and where there is still no headstone. Maybe when they set your headstone, I can lay my grief to rest along beside you. I think of the way you held me at night, strong arms wrapped protectively over me as if you could shield me from the discord of the world. I can still feel your breath tickling my ear, your snore rumbling through both our bodies. You always slept so warm, which was perfect because I sleep so cold. It wasn't just you that I lost that day. It was the future I had planned. The house in Denver, the drooling pug pawing at an old toy, the 3 tiny children making a mess in the kitchen. I feel cheated, but I also feel selfish because you don't get those things either. What you got was a short, half-lived life, full of love. You rest in an underground prison, thoughtless, only alive through the memories of those that loved you and would share your prison if they could. Maybe when they set your headstone, I can lay to rest beside you. Thank you.
So my name is Nate, and I'll be quick because there's a lot of words. And for the record, I don't take heroin. This is called, it's an intro to a story. I've been thinking about forgiveness a lot lately, so this is called Smack. The gulls were crying on the day they baptized me in the Atlantic. Their call was shrill and raw, and it skinned the air naked. I was shivering. The waves lapped against my stomach and cooled my blood. My skin constricted like elastic as though it was trying to keep me from being given to the sea. The endless and beginningless, the womb and the grave, the entire ocean bounded away from me and met up there all at the same time. Where I stood was infinity meeting at the head of a needle. At least as far as I was concerned, it was infinite. You couldn't fathom it if you tried. You could throw everyone you know into it, all the empty space you carry in yourself and every touch you've ever shared with the world, and you still wouldn't fill it up. You wouldn't even come close. The ocean is God's throat, and I stood at the tip of his tongue, hoping to be spoken alive again. "How about it, Dom?" the pastor said in a big, quiet Carolina voice. Pastor Jack was a grizzly man. His forearms were thick as my shoulders and covered in old track marks, but he carried himself soft. His hair was white as the waves when they break, and he had two different eyes. One was a sharp whitish blue, and the other was nearly cobalt. They were the type of eyes that make you feel still inside. The church was Unitarian. There were maybe 10 people there on that beach, myself and Pastor Jack included. They were wearing blue jeans and flannels and skirts, and not one was wearing shoes. "All right, then," I said and nodded to him. "What do you say when someone asks if you're ready for something like that? Saying anything at all is an act of audacity, a lovely lie certain to turn you inside out. I had only told one lie like that before." Jack put a burly hand on the back of my neck and placed the other firmly over my chest before putting me under the waves. The water's cold surface rose like a lip up my spine, and I felt all the weight begin to lift from my body. The ground sank away until the only tangible thing was his arm. The world tilted slowly forward. The water curled up my neck. It was cold enough to chase the breath from me. I heard the gull's harsh cry muffle and pull away from my ears as the water swelled in, and then close. It slid up the sides of my face, and my whole being was horizontal. I looked eye level into the sky, and then dark. The soft pressure of the ocean closed over me like a deep, dreamless sleep. There was no time. I had no body. There was only a simple, serene quiet. That is what the first hit of heroin was like. Thanks.
Next, Helicon West. Nate's going to be reading it, that one too. It's the Creative Writing Contest winners from USU. It's not going to be here in this room. It will be on campus, Library 101, Merrill Kazera Library 101, 7 o'clock, 26th of April. It'll be our last Poetry Month event for Helicon West. So I hope you will all come out and see us. Please put your chairs against the wall when you leave, and thanks for coming.